A good snooker technique is all about getting your cue and your body into exactly the right place to play a shot. So here's a complete guide to getting yourself in the right position with all the tricks that make it so much easier. This is Break From Life.
Chance at least to get back into the frame.
Welcome back, and if it's your first time watching one of our videos, then it's fantastic to have you here. Surprisingly, the majority of snooker players believe that their techniques aren't really good enough to be able to play the game properly. But this is rarely the case, and usually a few small adjustments can make all the difference, as I'm hopefully showing left-handed here. It's possible to pot the ball no matter how bad your technique is, it's just a lot less likely. It's worth remembering that a good technique doesn't make you play the game well, it just makes it a lot more predictable to play. That's absolutely vital if you want to be able to pot any shot consistently. And having a good technique involves getting three vital things right. Positioning your cue on line. You have to be able to position your cue on the line of the shot before you're able to cue it straight. We talked about how you can find the line of the shot in the previous video all about aiming. Click the card in the top right corner if you haven't seen it already, because you have to be able to cue along this line if you want to pot any shot without side spin. But your cue doesn't get there on its own, you need the correct body placement in order to make any of this work. Having a technique that allows you to cue straight. Now, getting your cue in the right place is one thing, but you also have to be able to deliver it straight on the line of the shot. So that's without your cue coming across the ball at an angle. So you haven't just got to get your cue on line before the shot, you've got to keep it there all the way through the shot right to the very end. Having a consistent technique. It doesn't matter how good your cueing is if it only works every now and again. It's far better to have an average cue action that you can repeat time after time. All snooker players play the game in a different way and at different shapes and sizes, so there's not going to be a standard technique that's right for everybody. So you'll probably find that not everything in this video is right for you, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of this video is to show you how to find a technique that works specifically for you and your individual needs as a player, beginning with the stance. Most people wrongly think that having a good stance is all about keeping you steady on the shot, but there's far more to it than that. Your stance fixes your body in position, and it's the position of your body that gets your cue on the line of the shot. What usually goes wrong if you have a bad stance is you're still striking the cue ball in the right place, but you're not necessarily striking it at the right angle. We call this cueing across the ball, and it doesn't stop you potting anything by any means. But it does mean you're forced into playing the shot with side spin, which makes the game a lot harder to play. As it should by now be clear, to get your cue in the right angle you need to get your foot in the right place. This usually means placing the foot under your cue arm on or around the line of the shot. The position of your cue is also affected by your other foot, but nowhere near so dramatically. You just want to place it slightly in front and wide enough so some of your weight goes onto this foot and your bridge hand. It really is worth practicing where to stand until you find exactly the right place, and this should be obvious, because when you get it right the cue ball will go where you want to with very little effort, and will almost feel like you have to move in order to miss the shot. The second trick can help you get this right every time. Before you play the shot, stand back from the table and take about 2 steps in. Now if you place your cue out in front of you like this as you do it, you can get it on the line of the shot and you can see where to stand underneath it without having to pay any attention to it really. And that allows you to come in the right position, and all the time you're keeping the cue perfectly on the right line to play the shot, so it's going to be harder for you to cue across the ball. The bridge hand. Making a bridge in order to play almost any shot on the table is relatively simple. Just place your hand flat on the table, bring your knuckles up and your thumb in. It's very important to make sure your thumb is tight into your hand and is very steady, because this is the easiest part of your technique to actually move. For cueing off a cushion, you want what's usually referred to as a loop bridge. This is where you rest the cue against your thumb on the cushion and loop your finger over the top of it. And this works really well on all cushion shots until the cue ball gets too close to the cushion and you can't really see it over the top of your hand. So for this and any shots that are closer to the cushion, most players will rest their knuckles against the side of the table and cue between their thumb and their forefinger. The trick to having a good bridge is just to keep it still, because it's the most likely part of your entire technique to move as you play the shot. And the problem is, if you keep moving it when you play every single shot, eventually you're going to miss, because you're just not going to be able to be consistent like that. The second thing that can really help with your bridge arm is getting the right amount of elbow bend.
Having a slightly bent elbow can increase your balance, but can have more of an effect on your technique than this. Not only does a greater elbow bend bring your body weight forward more, it can also heavily affect your body's position and the angle of your cue arm, which we'll talk more about later. It's just helpful to be able to keep the angle of your bridge arm consistent. Gripping the cue.
A good grip will involve wrapping your thumb and forefinger around the cue like that, just tight enough to hold it still and not any tighter. Then with your other 3 fingers, you want to keep them on the cue at all times so they're always touching it. But these want to be a lot looser, allowing the cue to stay level. So when you're playing the shot, you're not picking it up in the air like this as you play it, you can keep it flat. The trick to this, and probably the whole technical side of snooker, is getting your wrist at the right angle. This can be incredibly difficult to do, and if you get it at the wrong angle, you'll find it very, very difficult to actually pot anything.
Generally, if you hold the cue by your side in a relaxed position, then it will usually be at the right angle to play a shot with. And most of the time, the less you rotate your cue, the better your wrist technique will be. This should give you not only better consistency, but a lot greater cue power. The cue arm.
A big mistake I commonly see players making is always holding the cue right at the back, and this can cause a problem, because that will mean your cue arm isn't always in the right place, and it's very difficult
to strike the ball accurately like this with your arm too far back and often feeling far too stiff.
Ideally, you want your cue arm pointing straight down towards the floor when you're striking the cue ball, and so it's not too far forward or back. Now this can be quite difficult to get right, because a lot of things can affect it, like the elbow bend I explained earlier. And if you're not cueing right up to the ball, then you can find you've already played the shot by the time you're actually striking it. So what you need to do is just get as close as you possibly can to having your elbow at the perfect angle. But the big trick here is not to put yourself off by thinking about it on the shot. If what you're doing feels comfortable, then it's probably right or close enough. And this is far less of a problem than people actually think it is. All these little tricks aren't necessarily going to make you a textbook snooker player, but they are going to do something far more vital. Make the game easier for you to see and play.
Ultimately, better consistency is something that just makes the game far less frustrating, which I know is the main thing that puts people off from playing it, but hopefully not Samuel from Kampala in Uganda.
So now you know you're in exactly the right place to pot the ball. All you've got to be able to do is cue it straight.
But delivering the cue straight from a good technique is exactly what we're talking about in the next video in this series, where we show you not only how to cue straight, but how to take advantage of straight cueing. And remember, don't just watch, play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.